from a snowy UK. It snowed in the night, and it's still snowing a little bit now. So it's very cold in my workshop. Very, very cold. I've got the heater on behind me, but it's not taking the edge off today, with it being so cold. So I'm going to show you what I'm up to in the workshop today. I've actually, I'm embarrassed to even turn the camera around, but I've got so much going on. There's a table down here, there's a piece here, there's a piece over there, there's a red piece over there, and there's a piece up here. There's also a piece behind me here, which is what I'm going to show you today. So this piece down here is a piece that I've had up for sale for a while, and haven't had, where are you, there we go, haven't had much interest in it. And the reason being is I painted it in a neutral shade. Now, for most people, or for a lot of people, not for most people, for a lot of people, neutral shades do extremely well, and it's always considered the safe choice. But for some reason, I'm not able to sell neutral colours too well. So I painted this to show a brand new shade of paint that Dixie Belle released. I don't even know when it was. And it was a silk mineral paint colour, and it was called Badlands. And it's a really nice shade. I actually don't mind a good neutral, but I just can't sell them. I mean, I prefer to paint in colour, but I appreciate neutrals, and I appreciate there's a place for them, and I love it when other people do them. I follow quite a lot of people that just do neutrally kind of farmhouse colours, and I love their work, but for some reason I can't sell neutral, and that's fine. We all have our thing, and colour is mine, apparently. It would appear. Anyway, I had a customer contact me. She loved this piece, but she has some other pieces in her home that wouldn't go with this colour. So she messaged me and asked what the chances were that I could repaint this piece, and then she would buy it. And I was like, absolutely. So she's paid me a little bit more to repaint this piece, which I'm gladly going to do, because at least she's going to buy it. At least it's sold now. And the weird thing is, when I picked this piece up, the initial colour that I thought of that would suit this piece was black, and that's the colour that she wants me to paint it. So always stick to your gut instincts, because if I'd have painted this black to start off with, it would have saved me having to repaint it. It probably would have also sold, and it wouldn't have sat in my storage unit for quite so long. Anyway, it is what it is. It's sold now. So you have a double chin and you're blocked. Bye. Let's see how you do it. There we go. Thanks for stating the obvious. I'm also wearing a blue jumper, if you wanted to point that out. I don't know what that has to do with what I am currently doing, which is painting furniture, but there we go. You do get some weirdos that sit on YouTube. Maybe go and find something constructive to do. Get a hobby, like painting furniture. It might sort of release your whatever anger, whatever issues you've got going on there. So this piece behind is almost finished. Almost finished. I say almost because I'm going to do the rest of it with you now. So this will be a video that I am going to put together for the Dixie Belle YouTube channel, which is obviously the channel that I'm on now. It's going to be a short, edited little version of it. So I'm just going to show you a little snapshot of what I'm currently doing. I'm just going to wipe any little bits of dust off the top. There we go, just using my sleeve because that's how I roll. And what I've got here is a Dixie Belle sanding sponge. So you can see these are like, it's got a sponge backing and then the sandpaper's on this side. So this is equivalent to a 220 grit. These are perfect for sanding in between coats of paint to get a really smooth finish. And that is exactly what I'm trying to do on this piece. So the colour that I'm using is this one. It's from the Silk All-in-One Mineral Paint. It's called Anchor. So this is their jet black. And that is what I'm going to do with on this piece, because it's got a built-in stain blocking primer. It's also got a built-in top coat, and it is the truest jet black that you will get, and it's a really easy paint to use. So I've already done, I'm going to try and tilt the camera down a little bit. Oh, that's perfect. I've already done 2 coats of paint on the top here. The third one is just going to be my third and final coat of paint, and in between each coat I've sanded with this. So as I've used it, it's kind of worn down a little bit, because obviously that's what sandpaper does. The more you use it, the more it kind of goes a little bit softer. So because this is now, you know, a little bit worn down, it's just going to give me a really fine sand. So I am literally just going to go that way across the top, and I'm hoping there'll be minimal imperfections. And then I'm going to go that way as well. So if there was any little bit of texture on here at all, just got a little bit in that corner that I need to address. Don't know what that is on there. A little bit of a... I'm getting to the end of this pot, so it could well be something that's stuck in the paint, maybe in the bottom of the jar or something. So all you want to do is basically make sure when you run your hand over your paint finish, you want to make sure that there's nothing that you can feel, because you sometimes get hair trapped in there, you sometimes get little kind of flecks of paint in there. So you just want to make sure before you apply your next coat of paint, you've got rid of anything texture wise that is going to cause any imperfections. Morning, Patty. Thank you, Audrey. I agree. They're blocked and reported. So imagine, I say this because I get quite a lot of comments on my videos on mainly Facebook. It's mainly Facebook. Imagine your existence. I'm not even going to say life, because they haven't got life. Imagine your existence as a person if you sit and watch either pre-recorded, edited videos or live videos like this one and choose to comment on something that you don't like. More fool you for watching it, that's what I say. I just find it a very bizarre way to exist. So strange. Anyway, thank you for being here. Those of you that have said hi, those of you said good morning, hello. 36 of you now watching, hello. So, just going over it really, really finely. As you can see, I don't know if you can actually. I've picked up a little bit of something here. It could have been like a bristle or something. Quite often, more often than not, it's dog hair that I have a problem with, because I've got 3 dogs. I do try and keep them out of here as much as I can. And also, the other thing to bear in mind is clothing that you're wearing. If you're going for a super smooth finish, don't wear anything that's like fluffy and that's got fibres. That's where I wear like pullover type things, sweatery type things. Nothing that's fluffy or got fibres that can kind of float off and get stuck in your drying paint. I've done it before. I used to have a fluffy cardigan and it was like a mustardy colour, and I couldn't figure out where all these fibres were coming from and sticking in my paint. It was my cardigan. So that's worth noting, especially at this time of year. You're very tempted to put, you know, like a fluffy jumper or something on that's going to keep you nice and warm. Don't do it. Don't do it. So with this being the final coat, like I say, I've already done 2 thin coats of this. Because this is going to be the final coat, I just want to make sure that I have got rid of any little bits that are going to show up in my final coat of paint. But I did also sand between coats 1 and 2. So this is going to be the 3rd that I'm going to apply today. And I've already done obviously 1 and 2 coats before that. And I did sand in between those as well. See, there's fluff, dog hair, fluff. I don't know where that's come from. Anyway, then what you are going to need to do, because once you've sanded, it may not look like there's anything on the surface, but there will be a fine kind of little bit of dust on the surface from sanding. So you need to make sure you get that off. I usually use a microfiber cloth, or because these are designed to cling, like dust is designed to cling to them. They're designed to cling to dust. No, they're designed to pick dust up. They are obviously for that. Or you can get specialist tack cloths that are just for this. I don't tend to use them because I don't do an awful lot of smooth finishes, and they're also quite expensive. But can you see on here that, I mean, it wasn't mega clean before, but that is all the little bits of dust that have just been kind of sanded off. So if you were to leave that dust on here without taking it off and then go straight in with your coat of paint, you would get like a very fine, kind of like a gritty, any like texture. So always make sure that when you've sanded between coats, you take the dust off the surface as well. And then we're good to go. So, because this has been painted in one colour, I've been using the same 2 brushes for the entire piece. So I'm using this brush for the large flat surfaces, and then I've been using this brush for the smaller detail. And these are both synthetic brushes. They're both from Dixie Belle. This one's a oval small. This one's a flat large. They've both got synthetic bristles, and I find that synthetic bristles are better for getting a smooth finish. Natural bristles will give you a little bit more texture, and that's cool if you want to create texture, but I don't on this piece. So we're going for this. I always wrap my brushes in a bag. If I know I'm going to come back to a piece and I'm going to use the same colour, but I just need to wait for the piece to dry or whatever, I always put them in a plastic bag, squeeze the air out of them, seal them up, and then that saves you having to continuously wash brushes. It also saves product because there's quite a lot of paint still on the bristles of this. So I can just go straight ahead and start painting. So like I say, I am getting to the end of this tub. I probably should have cracked a new one open actually. But we should be okay. We should be okay. So, silk mineral paint. A lot of people ask me, how do you get a flawless finish? How do you get it streak free? How do you eliminate brush strokes? And how do you paint large flat surfaces like this one? So I always use a synthetic brush. I always make sure that I've sanded between coats because that gives you a smooth finish. With regard to how do you get a streak-free finish, how do you avoid brush strokes, the amount of paint that you put on your brush is going to make a difference. If you overload your brush, you're going to have too much paint on your surface and you can have basically streak marks or brush strokes because there's physically too much paint on the surface. If you put too little amount of paint on, it's going to be trying to kind of spread too thinly, and that's when you get streakiness and patchiness. So the amount of paint that you put on is important. There's so many weirdos on this chat, on this live today. Normally there is not. but there are today for some reason. Maybe people need to go and get a job or something, I don't know. So if you are used to using chalk mineral paint and you're used to using chalk mineral paint with a lot of water, because chalk mineral paint loves it when you add water to it, and you can get away with using a very, very small amount of chalk mineral paint to cover it, you might have to switch up your technique a little bit, because this paint, Dixie Belle advised that you don't add water to it for a start. So I'm not going to miss the surface of this before I paint. That's the difference between using chalk mineral paint. If you see me using chalk mineral paint, mostly I'll be using it with a little bit of spray of water to make it go further, unless I'm using it for texture or something like that. But this only has a 10% tolerance that you can add water-wise to this before it starts to compromise what this is meant to do. Because don't forget, this has got a built-in primer, it's got a built-in top coat, there's loads of other things that it's got, like anti-mildew, it's UV resistant, there's lots of things that this paint's got. It's a very good paint. But if you add more than 10% water to this, it stops doing those things. So your built-in top coat is compromised, your built-in stain blocking primer is compromised. So that means you're going to have to add a top coat, which is kind of defeating the object, if that makes sense. So only a bunch of weirdos. There are a bunch of weirdos here, aren't there, today? Not usually on YouTube, but it must just be today for some reason. So, yes, what was I saying? So, amount of paint that you put on your brush will make a big difference to your application of silk. And if you are used to using chalk mineral paint, you probably will have to put a little bit more paint on your brush than what you used to. So if this was chalk mineral paint, I'd probably be taking off the majority of paint. Bearing in mind this brush is loaded anyway with paint, but I'd probably just take off and just literally leave a small amount of paint on, because when you spritz water on the surface, that goes a heck of a long way. Anybody that's used chalk mineral paint, you know what I'm talking about. It goes a long way. Whereas silk, it needs a little bit more paint on the surface. So I will probably add that amount of paint. As for this large surface, what you'll see most people doing is going left to right. Now, that's fine. But when you're trying to smooth out a big old surface like this and apply your paint in a kind of smooth fashion, it's a big old surface to work with, left to right. I've got to get from here to here and kind of level it out before it starts to dry. Obviously, the warmer the environment that you're painting, the quicker it's going to dry. I'm okay because I'm in the UK and it's snowing, so it's not warm. So this paint isn't going to dry too quick. That is not going to be my problem today. But what the other thing you can do is do back to front. Who says you have to do left to right when you're painting? This isn't wood. It's not a real wood thing. It's not at all. So I don't need to follow any wood grain or anything like that. There's absolutely no reason that you can't do from top to bottom or back to front or whatever it is, because that surface here, that distance, is a lot shorter than going that way. And you are trying to make your paint smooth, and like I say, it's going to start drying before you've had a chance to kind of fiddle around with it. Whereas this space here is a lot shorter. So that's what I'm doing on this piece. And so far, it's working okay. Because like I say, you've got a chance to get the paint down and kind of smooth it out before it's had a chance to dry. It's a much shorter distance. So then I'm going to dip it in again, load it up again. I've just done that small area, and I'm not going to start here because I've already got paint here. And if I put this down here, it's going to put too much product down where I've already got product. So I'm going to kind of step it up to about here. So leave a gap and go about here. And that way, the majority of the product that's on your brush, and then work backwards to meet where I've just painted to. I hope you can see what I'm doing on the camera. The lighting's pretty good because it snowed. Everywhere's white, so it's not too dingy today. And then what I do before I load my brush again is just go over it really, really lightly. I'm not putting any pressure down at all. And again, leave a gap and go about here I'm only doing a small area at a time because you can tell when this paint starts to drag because it feels stiff on the surface. So that's when you know it's either starting to dry or you've got too little amount of paint on your brush. So I'm just going to go to there and then dip in again, leave a little bit of a gap and go to here and then meet where I've already gone up to, sort of go back on myself. That way you don't get that big build-up of product. That's going to reduce your brush strokes in your paint. It's going to mean you've got a nice even distribution. And when I lay off, which is what I'm doing now, you don't want your bristles to be like that. You just want to touch the very edge of your bristles and hardly any pressure at all on the surface. And with silk, I always go in one direction. So I won't go top to bottom like this. I will always go in one direction like that, because that way this paint is all lying in the same direction and you are going to minimize the brush strokes in it. And also if you lay it off in the same direction, it means that the light is going to be always hitting it exactly the same. So there's no inconsistencies. Sometimes if you lay it off and go forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards, you can see where you've changed direction. And you might also alter how firmly you're putting that down on the surface because of the direction that you're doing it. Whereas I find if you do it in one direction, you're more likely to get it even and consistent. Oh, just got my wall. My staging wall, it gets some hammer, it gets some abuse. Again, just going back to where I crossed the paint over and laying it off before I move on to the last section. So this paint is self-leveling, so you don't have to do an awful amount to it. This laying it off where I'm just putting the tip of my bristles right on the surface, and just as well, if you are quite heavy-handed like I am, hold your brush at the end. If you hold it down here, you're more likely to put more pressure on. If you hold it higher up, you're going to apply less pressure on the surface. And then just the tips of the bristles of your brush, just run it down, and that's going to help obviously the paint be really nice and even on the surface. If you've got any kind of big gloops in it or anything like that, it's going to help even it out. And then leave it. Don't overwork it, because now this paint is on here, I've got the heater behind me, it's going to want to dry. And the last thing you want to do as it's starting to dry is start messing around with it. So if you see a bit over here where you started and there's a bit of imperfection and it's already started to dry, if you go over it with the brush, you're going to create more texture. You're better off leaving it to dry, sanding it smooth with the sander, the sanding pad that I just used, and then going over it again. It's a longer process, but it will get you better results. 2 seconds. We've got some more weird. Never ever had this amount of comments before. Weird comments on a YouTube live. Where are all the weirdos coming from? So like I say, this paint is self-leveling. I'll get back to what I was actually saying. And I've just found a little bit of a white fleck on my paint. And this is what you shouldn't do. Don't do what I'm doing. Don't go back over your paint. I know the tolerances of this paint because I've used it a lot. But if you do see a little area of imperfection, leave it to dry. Don't try and tinker with it. It's not like chalk mineral paint. You can't add a spritz of water to this and reactivate it before it's had a chance to fully dry. This paint dries differently to chalk mineral paint. So this paint dries from the top down. So the top layer will form a skin. So if I poured this out on the floor or on my hand or whatever, on a piece of cardboard, it would form a skin over the top first, and the underneath would still be wet. So the top of this is already trying to dry. And the last thing you want to do when that's trying to dry is go over it with your brush, because you're going to disrupt it and that texture won't lie flat again. You're just going to have to sand it and repaint it anyway. Go over it with another coat of paint. So you may as well leave it if you get texture and catch it next time. That's why I was being super careful, because I'm hoping that this is going to be the final coat. That's 3 coats I've put on this, because I was going over quite a light beige colour. So going from one extreme to the other is always going to take another coat of paint. Usually this I can get to cover in 2 coats, but because I'm taking it from quite a light colour to jet black, it's taken me 3 coats. So leave it to dry, let it do its thing. Even if you see some brush strokes, you would be amazed how well this self-levels. And the self-leveling, again, comes back to how much paint you put on here. So if you're not putting enough paint on your bristles, it's not going to be able to self-level before it starts to dry, because it's trying to dry and self-level at the same time. It's just going to just dry, patchy and streaky. Whereas if you've got the right amount of paint, it is going to self-level. I don't know if anybody has used gloss paint before, like an oil-based gloss. So that is very similar, and eggshell as well. The technique is similar. I've recently used gloss, oil-based gloss. That's the only reason it's in the forefront of my mind, because I've had to do skirting boards in my home and I've had to use gloss because we've got 3 dogs, 2 kids. Gloss is the only thing. It's the only thing. So you have to apply it for it to sit smooth. You have to really whack it on with gloss. With this, if you're used to using like a chalk-based paint, like chalk mineral paint, you have to use a little bit more in order to get the fluidity. That was a big word. I even cut myself off right before I finished. Fluidity of paint on the surface for it to be able to lie smooth. And that laying it off where I'm just kind of brushing it back over, that's just promoting everything to be kind of smooth and even. And then it's just going to, as it dries, it's going to self-level, and hopefully you should get a pretty decent finish. Having said that, don't forget, we are hand painting furniture. If you've got a roller, brilliant. If you've got a sprayer, brilliant. I definitely don't use a sprayer. I've got nowhere to spray. I have no experience of spraying. It's not my thing. Rolling, sometimes, but my preference is always a brush. It's just what I've always used. It's what I'm used to. It's a personal preference. Not everybody's the same. Some people are amazing at spraying. You can spray this, by the way. You can also roller it. But my preference and my experience is with the brush. So that's what I'm telling you about now. But that's how I get a smooth finish with silk, because I have had a video recently where I've had a few questions about it. How do you get a smooth finish with silk? People were saying that they get brush strokes and streakiness and blah, blah, blah. It's mainly down to the application, how much paint you've got and the type of brush that you're using. So like I say, this is a synthetic brush. It's got super smooth bristles. They dry, it looks like, obviously this is a different shape, but this is what they look like dry. So they've got like these ready coloured bristles, and then right at the end, they are super, super smooth. So this is going to promote the paint to lie nice and smooth. It's just really nice and soft, really good for giving you a really flawless finish. So my advice would be invest in a good brush, get used to how much paint you need to put on the surface, lay it off really, really finely, and don't dabble with it when it's trying to dry from the top down. Chalk mineral paint dries from the inside out, and that's why it's just different. It's just a different kind of technique, different application. This one, if you've never used silk mineral paint before and you're used to a different type of paint, it does take a little bit getting used to. When silk first got released and I first got my hands on it, I was a bit like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But I've kind of got the hang of it now. A few years in, and I've done a fair few pieces in silk. I think I've got the hang of it, and that is, there's a few tips. And there's probably more. There's probably more experienced painters that are watching this thinking, yeah, there's loads more to it than that, but that's just the basics for me. Like I say, I prefer a textured finish. I like doing lots of different effects and things like that, but from time to time I get asked to do these kind of flawless finishes, and that is how I tackle it. So I can't really show you anything else on this because it's all at a very odd stage. Mainly due to drying time, mainly due to it being the winter and it being freezing. So I love to hand paint. Yeah, me too, Patty. There's something about a brush. There's just something about a brush that a roller doesn't give, and I can't imagine a paint sprayer would either. I'm not a paint sprayer. It just doesn't float my boat. It's like the people that comment on my videos and say that should be restored. I got no interest. I've got no interest in restoring furniture. I like to paint furniture. Personal preference, each to their own. That's what I say. There's people out there that are amazing with a roller. Amazing. I'm not one of them. That's not my thing. I prefer a brush. Anyway, as you can see, you might not be able to see. Can you see? It's looking pretty smooth. And you know what? If it isn't, I'll just do the same process, exactly the same process again. So I'll wait for it to completely dry, and that will probably be, realistically, at least a couple of hours with the heater on in here at the minute, just because of the temperature. Wait for it to dry, get my sanding sponge out again, lightly sand it. Sometimes it takes a little while to get it perfect, and hopefully I'll get there. I'll get there in the end. But these large flat surfaces are always going to be tricky. Always going to be tricky, unless you do have, you're a dab hand with a sprayer or whatever. But they're always going to present problems because of how there's nothing to break the light up on them. So if you imagine a piece that's got lots of detail all over it, obviously the light's hitting it in all different ways, and there's no continuity. It's all kind of intricate and different. Whereas this, you've got nowhere to hide your flaws. You've got nowhere for imperfections to go because it's just one big flat surface. So yes, I just painted the top of it. I'm not painting the entire piece because most of it's already painted. But as you can see, it's drying. It's starting to dry up. So you can see areas where it's still wet. It's a little bit dry. This is definitely when you don't want to touch it. If you see a hair in it, if you see any texture, if you see a gloop of paint, don't be tempted to touch it. Don't touch it. Walk away. Walk away and just think, right, I'll come back to it when it's dried up. Get your little sanding sponge out, sand it down, and go in with another coat of paint. It's the only way, because if you touch it now, you're only going to make texture and have to sand it and repaint it anyway. So no point. No point. So apart from that, I mean, there's not a lot to show you because this is the piece. This is the piece. We've got no drawers in. They're over there. We've got no doors on. They're over there. They're being painted as well. So hopefully I will be able to get this finished in the next couple of days. Like I say, I'm going to edit a little short video from start to finish to show you how I've taken it from the beige colour to the black. And that will be available on the Dixie Belle YouTube channel probably in the next couple of weeks. So if you did want to see the transformation, obviously I've only shown you a snippet of the process here on the live today, but if you did want to see the process, it will be available on the Dixie Belle YouTube channel. There's loads of other videos on the Dixie Belle YouTube channel as well. Lots of different paint techniques, styles, lots of different painters on here, so make sure you subscribe to the channel. As I say, I'm live here every Tuesday. Weirdo's not invited next week, if that could be a possible request. We've had so many weirdos. So many more weirdos. Instagram, I used to get the weirdos. Instagram, if you've been following me for a while, you'll remember my Instagram videos. I used to get marriage requests on there. Weird. So weird. But I've never had weirdos on YouTube until today. So thank goodness for the block and report button. Anyway, I will be live back here next Tuesday, same time, but with something different. I'm hoping this will have long gone by then. I'm hoping it's winged its way to its new owner and I'll be on with something completely different. So I will catch you next week. Thanks for watching and I'll see you later.